that every single poll highlights as the #1 concern. So what are they focusing on in the Congress today? A bill, yet another bill, that takes dead aim at a woman's right to choose. Yes, with 14 million Americans out of work, they are focused on the so-called Protect Life Act, which would make it illegal for federal funding to go to any health care plan that provides abortion services. And this would apply even if a woman pays for a procedure herself. The bill would go as far as to protect the right of a hospital to deny a woman a termination under any circumstances, even in life-threatening situations. Hardly surprising, then, that the provision has earned the moniker the Let Women Die Act from its opponents. But Republicans insist this is what the majority of Americans want.
Pro-life members of Congress, and according to every reputable poll, majorities of Americans want no complicity whatsoever in the destruction of human life.
But Mr. Smith, in fact, the overwhelming majority of Americans support these procedures in some circumstances, 97%. The bill is expected to pass the House this evening, but has no chance in the Senate. Joining us now is Congresswoman DeGette, a Democrat from the state of Colorado, who spoke against the bill on the House of the Floor earlier today. Good afternoon.
Hi, Martin.
Thank you for joining us. When you see the approval rating for Congress hitting an all-time low, and with the economy in such a state of turmoil and the House of Representatives spending precious time debating this kind of bill, do you understand why so many Americans hate representatives and hate the House?
I do, Martin, because this bill is a bill, we've passed it several times in the House. It always dies in the Senate. We want to know, with 20 days left in the legislative session, why don't you talk about jobs? I mean, millions of Americans are without jobs. And you know, what they say is they're stopping federal funding from paying for abortions. But in fact, under the Hyde Amendment, I don't like the Hyde Amendment, but it's the law of the land. Under the Hyde Amendment, no federal funds goes to pay for abortions anyway. So this bill goes far, far beyond that. It says a couple of really disturbing things. The first thing it says is that women who buy insurance policies in the insurance exchanges that are going to be set up with their own private money can't buy a policy that covers full reproductive services. The other thing it says, which is really disturbing, is emergency room providers now don't have to help a woman who is in need of medical services who could die. And that is really disturbing, and it's actually quite extreme.
We are watching all of the testimony, all of the speeches and so on the floor, but am I right to say that there's been not a single comment about jobs today?
No, except for from the Democrats. The Democrats keep saying, why, with 20 legislative days left, we pass a jobs bill?
Can I play for you some remarks from your colleague, Representative
Certainly.
Jackie Speer, who previously made, as you know, an emotional admission that she had to terminate a pregnancy. Today, she said this. Take a listen.
What my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are attempting to do is misogynist. It is absolutely misogynist.
Do you agree with her? Is the content of this bill misogynistic?
You can hardly not agree with Congresswoman Spears when you see the assault on women's health that we have had this whole Congress. I mean, they've tried to cut women's right to full reproductive choice. They've tried to cut women funding for birth control and for cervical and breast cancer screening, and on and on and on. So the whole anti-women's health agenda is a misogynist agenda.
But why, when the nation, as we've already discussed, has 14 million Americans out of work, why, when poverty levels are at their highest since the 1950s, the early 1950s, you know all these statistics, they know all these statistics, and yet they spend this time on this specific issue. Which individual is going to get a job out of this? Who's going to actually get any opportunity to come out of a university and find employment as a result of what's happening on the floor now? Tell me.
Nobody, and that's what the problem is. I mean, the problem is they are catering to the far extreme right. They have passed this bill several times this Congress, and even worse bills. They've died in the Senate. And why don't they just say, okay, let's focus on coming together and having a jobs plan? Why don't we work with Democrats and with the president and come up with a plan for jobs? Instead, they spend all their time frittering away, undermining the environmental laws, undermining a woman's right, putting women's health at jeopardy. It's really a mystery to us.
Both the Speaker Boehner and Majority Leader Cantor said they brought this bill to the floor to fulfill the pledge to America that many in the GOP made in 2010. Do you accept that they're only basically fulfilling a promise that they gave originally?
Well, they've been fulfilling this pledge over and over and over this year. We've passed scores of bills that either take away women's health rights in general or take away women's reproductive rights. So I don't know how many times they have to fulfill this pledge at the expense of fulfilling what should be everybody's pledge, which is to help create jobs for the millions of Americans out of work.
So are you suggesting that in purely cynical terms, what they're trying to do is have this kind of what you said was a war on women in order to injure the president? Is that really who they want to injure? And they're using the issue of women's reproductive rights in order to undermine the possibility or even prevent the possibility of there being any kind of substantive progress through the Congress on this jobs bill that the president has already presented.
I really have no idea why the Republicans in the House would bring up yet another bill that restricts a woman's right to choose here and now, because we've already passed many of those bills. I think what it does is it caters to the far right, but it doesn't do anything to help us put more money in for women's health, to help women get cervical and breast cancer screening, to help them get the full range of reproductive services that they need, or to create one single job in this country. So I don't know what they're trying to do, but it certainly doesn't undermine them with the voters. I think it's, as you said at the beginning, the voters would be scratching their heads if they were watching this debate today and say, what on earth is Congress doing? Even voters who don't believe in a woman's right to choose, surely jobs should be the #1 agenda item of the U.S. Congress.
It certainly is for you. Congresswoman Diana DeGette, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be on. Thanks.
And we'll be right back to clear the air.
For sore muscles, use new Bengay Cold Therapy. Its Pro-Cool technology releases armies of snowmen masseuse who cuddle up with your soreness and give out polar bear hugs.